Frozen and hunted, the alien woman begged, "Take me in, human. I'll give you strong heirs, just don't let them take me."
The wind howled like a wounded animal. Rain hammered against the old wooden house, each drop sounding like a tiny bullet. Lightning flashed, turning the dark forest white for a second, then throwing it back into deep black. Inside, Daniel Rook sat alone near the fire, a mug of black coffee in his hands. The ex-soldier had chosen this lonely place for peace, far away from the noise of the cities, far away from the wars he no longer wanted to fight. He was used to silence. But tonight, silence was broken. At first, he thought it was the wind. A faint, slow knock came from the front door. It was too soft to be a soldier's knock, too steady to be the random banging of a branch in the storm. Daniel set his cup down and reached for the old shotgun leaning against the wall. Another flash of lightning lit the room, and in that instant, he thought he saw a tall shadow outside the glass. The knock came again, louder, urgent. Daniel stepped carefully to the door, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He opened it just a crack, ready for trouble. What he saw made him freeze. A tall, alien woman stood in the pouring rain. Her skin was a pale silver blue, glistening under the storm's light. Her long black hair clung to her face, dripping with water. She was trembling, her breath heavy, and her eyes glowing faint gold in the dark, locking onto with a strange mix of fear and determination. Before Daniel could speak, she dropped to her knees. Her voice was shaky but strong enough to cut through the roar of the rain. "My body is strong. I will bear you strong children. Just let me in." Daniel's grip tightened on the shotgun. His heart beat faster. He had fought in the human Thalran war years ago. He knew her kind. The Thalran females were warriors, feared for their strength, hunted for their bloodline. And yet here she was, knocking at his door. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Daniel asked sharply. Before she could answer, movement flashed in the darkness behind her. A shadow, no more than one, moved between the trees. A red light blinked for a moment. Daniel knew what that meant. Someone else was out there, hunting. "Get inside," he ordered. She hesitated, but another loud crack of branches from the forest made her obey. She stepped in, dripping water on the floor. Daniel shut the door quickly and bolted it. The house shook as the wind pushed against it. "Sit by the fire," Daniel said, watching her carefully. He could see she was exhausted, her knees weak, her lips almost blue from the cold. But her eyes kept flicking toward the door, like she expected it to burst open any second. Then, the knock came again. Daniel froze. The alien woman's eyes widened. The sound was heavy this time, strong. Whoever was outside was not afraid. A voice shouted through the storm. "We know she's in there. Open the door, Rook." Daniel felt his stomach turn. They knew his name. He hadn't told anyone he lived. Here, he looked at the alien woman. She shook her head violently, whispering, "Don't let them in, please." Daniel stepped to the window and pulled the curtain back just a little. Through the rain, he saw 3 human men in black jackets, their weapons strapped to their backs. Behind them, a searchlight scanned the forest. They weren't here for a friendly talk. The knocking turned into pounding. The voice came again. "Open up. This is official security business. We're taking the fugitive." Fugitive, Daniel's mind raced. If they were calling her a fugitive, it meant one of two things. Either she really had done something dangerous, or they wanted her for a reason they couldn't admit. Daniel turned back to her. "Tell me the truth," he demanded in a low voice. "Why are they after you?" Her answer was short, almost broken. "Because I escaped, and I'm not going back." The pounding grew louder. The old wood of the door began to shudder. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment Daniel thought he saw more shapes moving in the forest, maybe more than just 3 men. He had a choice to make: hand her over and stay safe, or protect her and risk his own life. The pounding stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Then, slow footsteps crunched on the wet ground outside. One of the men came right up to the window. Daniel stepped back, his finger resting lightly on the trigger of the shotgun. The man outside smiled through the glass. "Last chance, Rook. Give her to us. You don't want her kind in your house." Kayla, if that was even her name, stared at Daniel, her lips trembling, her breath quick and sharp. In her eyes he saw something that surprised him, not just fear, but a kind of hope. As if she truly believed he might save her. Outside, the footsteps moved away. But Daniel knew they weren't gone. They were waiting. The storm raged on. Inside, two strangers stood facing each other, one human, one alien, both knowing the night was far from over. The fire crackled in the small living room. Water dripped from the alien woman's hair, pooling on the old wooden floor. Daniel stood with his shotgun still in hand, eyes locked on her. "You said you escaped," he said. "Escape from where?" She stared at the flames for a moment before answering. Her voice was low, almost as if she feared the walls could hear her. "From the mines. The human-run mining camp near the eastern ridge." Daniel frowned. He knew about the mining camp. Everyone did. It was supposed to be a place where alien prisoners worked in exchange for food and shelter. But rumors said otherwise. Rumors of abuse, people vanishing, women being traded like property. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly in the firelight. "I was not a worker. I was property," she whispered. Daniel felt a cold anger stir inside him. He'd seen terrible things during the war, but the way she said it made him think this was worse. Outside, the storm still roared, somewhere in the distance. The faint hum of a generator told him the hunters were setting up camp nearby. "They weren't going away tonight. What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Kayla," she said, her alien accent making the syllables sound soft and sharp at the same time. He lowered the shotgun slightly. "Why did you come here? You don't even know me." Kayla's lips trembled, but her gaze stayed steady. "I followed the road until my body could no longer move. I saw a light in your window. I thought maybe a soldier would understand." She hesitated, then added, "And if you didn't, I would offer myself. My people's blood is strong. Our children survive anything. I thought it might make you let me in." Daniel's chest tightened. Her words were blunt, but they carried the weight of pure desperation. This wasn't seduction, it was survival. He walked to the window and peered through the curtain. The three armed men were still out there, their figures faint in the rain. One of them was speaking into a comm device, his face lit by its screen. Daniel's instincts told him they weren't security officers. They were bounty hunters. "They'll be back," Daniel said. "And they'll have more men with them." Kayla stood suddenly, her movements quick despite her exhaustion. "No, if they catch me they will take me to the breeding cells. I would rather die in the forest." Daniel didn't answer right away. His mind was calculating escape routes, supply counts, weapon condition. He hadn't planned for this. He wanted a quiet life. No more battles. No more saving anyone. But now in his own home stood someone who clearly had no one else. A sudden metallic click from outside snapped both their heads toward the door. Someone was testing the lock. Daniel motioned to her. "Downstairs, now." He opened a hatch hidden under the carpet, leading to a narrow wooden staircase. Kayla climbed down quickly, vanishing into the dark below. Daniel pulled the hatch closed just as heavy footsteps moved onto his porch. The knock came again, this time hard enough to shake the frame. "Rook!" A voice called out, deeper and more threatening now. "Open up, or we come in." Daniel's hand gripped the shotgun. He forced himself to speak calmly. "Come back in the morning." "It's a storm. Nobody's here." The man laughed. "Nobody?" Then you won't mind if we check." Before Daniel could respond, a distant scream cut through the night. It was sharp, sudden, the kind of sound that made the hairs on his neck rise. The men outside muttered something to each other, then ran toward the forest, weapons drawn. Daniel didn't wait. He opened the hatch and called down softly, "They're gone. For now." Kayla climbed back up, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "What was that scream?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not sure. Could be an animal, could be worse." She looked at him with a strange expression, a mix of trust and the rain slowed to a steady hiss, but the night stayed black as coal. Daniel sat near the window, shotgun across his knees, eyes scanning the tree line. Kayla sat by the fire, wrapped in an old blanket, her sharp alien features softened by exhaustion, but her eyes never rested. She kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Daniel's instincts were right. The men were coming back. A low crunch of boots on wet gravel made his muscles tense. Shadows moved on the porch. Then came the knock, heavy, deliberate, and slow, 3 times. Not the kind of knock that asks to come in, but the kind that says we already own this place. Daniel stepped forward and opened the door just enough to see them. 3 men in dark jackets stood there, faces half lit by the yellow porch light. Their boots were caked in mud, their hands resting too casually near their holstered weapons. "Evening, Rook," the one in front said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was tall, built like a soldier, but his stance was too loose. Like a predator playing with its prey. "You've got something of ours. A dangerous fugitive. We'll take her off your hands." Daniel didn't move. "You mean Kayla?" The man's smile widened. "So she gave you a name. Good. Makes it easier to log the paperwork." The man to his left spoke up, voice cold. "She's not just a runaway. She killed 2 men, humans. Good men." From the corner of his eye, Daniel saw Kayla stiffen by the fire. He didn't turn to look at her. He didn't want them to know she was listening. "She's not here," Daniel said flatly. The leader took a slow step forward, his boots creaking on the porch. "You're a smart man, Rook. You know what happens if you lie to us? The mines may be far from here, but accidents still happen in these woods." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, pretending to be calm. "You'll have to get your accidents somewhere else." The man's smile vanished. His eyes flicked toward the window behind Daniel, as if checking something. Then he took another step forward. "Last chance, move aside." Before Daniel could answer, a faint click came from the side of the house. He knew that sound, the safety of a rifle being switched off. They had someone flanking him. Daniel shifted his grip on the shotgun. "You're trespassing." The leader's eyes narrowed. "And you're harboring a killer." From inside, Kayla's voice rang out, sharp, angry, unafraid. "I killed because I wanted to live." "Tell them, Rook. Tell them what they are." The men's expressions hardened. One of them reached for his weapon. Daniel made his move. He slammed the door shut and dropped the heavy iron bar across it. "Downstairs." He barked at Kaela. The pounding began immediately, fists and boots hammering against the wood. Through the storm's hiss, Daniel heard one of them shout, "We'll be back with more men. And next time, we're not knocking." The sound of retreating footsteps faded into the night, but Daniel knew they were telling the truth. They'd be back. And not alone. Kayla emerged from the stairwell, her face pale but her eyes blazing. "You believe them?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, they'll be back. And they won't care if they burn the house to the ground." She stepped closer, gripping his arm. "Then we don't wait for them. We run." Daniel looked into those glowing eyes, saw the fear, the determination. He realized he was already part of this, whether he liked it or not. The rain outside began to pick up again, like the storm itself was warning them, and somewhere in the distance, a single howl rose through the trees. It wasn't human. By morning, the storm had passed, but the world outside had turned white. Snow blanketed the forest, soft and silent, erasing the night's chaos as if it had never happened. For Daniel, it was a false peace. The men would be back, and the snow would make tracking easy. Kayla stood by the window, her breath fogging the glass. Her eyes scanned the tree line, but her voice was far away when she spoke. In my world, snow means death. It buries the weak, hides the killers, and swallows the blood so no one knows who fell. Daniel glanced at her. You've seen that before, haven't you? She didn't turn. I lived it. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, but the shiver that ran through her wasn't from cold. When I was taken, I thought I'd be sent to the work pits. I was wrong. They sent me to the cells, to the breeders. Her jaw tightened, but her voice stayed steady, almost too steady. They said my blood was rare, that I could make strong children. They didn't ask if I wanted to. Daniel felt his grip tighten on the mug in his hand. He'd seen plenty in war, but there was something in her tone, a quiet, burning hatred, that told him her story wasn't just pain. It was rage. That's when you killed them, he guessed. Kella's golden eyes finally met his. They thought a chained woman can't fight. They forgot we train before we walk. Her voice grew sharp. They came in pairs, thinking it was safer. It wasn't. Daniel didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. But the image of two men lying in the snow, their blood seeping into the white, burned in his mind. Outside, a sudden crack broke the quiet, the sound of a branch snapping under weight. Daniel moved to the window, scanning the forest. A red glint flickered between the trees, the reflection of light on metal. A drone. Get down, he told her, pulling her away. From the glass. They're scouting. And if they've got drones, the hunters aren't far. Kella's hands balled into fists. Then we kill the drone before it calls them. Daniel gave her a quick look. You any good with a rifle? She didn't answer, just took the weapon from the wall, checked the chamber with smooth, practiced movements, and slid the window open. The cold rushed in, stinging their skin. The drone hovered closer, its small camera lens gleaming like an unblinking eye. Kayla steadied the rifle, exhaled, and fired. The shot cracked through the air. The drone spun wildly, sparks bursting from its side, then dropped into the snow. For a moment, silence. Then, a shout in the distance. They'd heard the shot. Daniel grabbed his pack. That's it, we move, now. They stepped outside, boots sinking into the snow. The forest felt too quiet, the white expanse stretching in every direction. Kayla walked ahead, her sharp senses guiding them. But every crunch of snow underfoot sounded like a beacon to anyone listening. Halfway to the ridge, Daniel caught it, the faint hum of engines. Snowbikes. They're splitting up, Kayla said. The engines were closing in. The sound bounced through the forest. Impossible to tell how many riders were coming, but enough to know they wouldn't survive standing still. Daniel pulled Kayla toward the slope. We take the ridge, stay low. No straight lines. Kayla moved like the snow was an old friend, each step light, barely leaving a trail. Daniel, heavier in his human boots, struggled to match her speed. She glanced back once, her sharp golden eyes narrowing. Your prints are too deep. They'll follow them. Without warning, she veered off toward a cluster of fallen pines. She dropped to her knees, scooping snow and brushing it over his trail, moving fast but precise. You're wasting time, Daniel hissed. I'm buying time, she shot back. Snowbikes roared louder. A flash of black and silver zipped between the trees below. They weren't far, and they had thermal scanners. Kayla crouched beside him, her voice a quick whisper. My people can hide from heat seekers. It's simple. Just don't breathe for too long. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Not exactly built for that. Then learn, she said sharply, grabbing a handful of frozen moss and pressing it to his face. This holds the cold. It'll fool them. They pressed themselves into a hollow under a snow-laden log, the frozen moss sealing their heat. Moments later, the bikes glided past above them. Daniel could see one rider's visor scanning in wide arcs. The crosshair beam swept over their hiding place and kept going. When the sound faded, Kayla didn't move. She held up a hand. Wait, a faint crunch of boots on snow. Daniel's gut tightened. The riders had dismounted. The shadow of a man fell across the log. Daniel gripped the shotgun, ready to fire, but Kayla shook her head. She slid out silently, moving through the snow like smoke, and was behind him before he could turn. Her arm wrapped around his neck, a quick twist, and he went limp. She lowered the body into the snow without a sound. "We move," she whispered. They climbed higher into the mountains, the air thinning, the wind sharper. Daniel's breath came in hard bursts. Kayla, though tired, kept scanning, her ears twitching slightly at sounds he couldn't hear. By late afternoon, the sky had turned steel gray. Snow began to fall again, slower this time, but enough to erase old tracks. Kayla stopped suddenly, raising a hand. "Something's wrong." Daniel scanned the ridge ahead, empty white and bare rock. "Looks clear." She shook her head. "Too clear." A second later, a thin whistle cut the air. Daniel ducked instinctively, and a bolt from a magnetic rifle tore through the snow where his head had been. "Sniper!" He growled. They bolted into the trees, weaving between trunks as more bolts hissed past. One slammed into a pine, the heat from it melting a line in the snow. Daniel returned fire blindly, but the shooter was too far and well hidden. Kayla yanked him toward a narrow gorge, half filled with ice. "This way. They can't ride in here." The gorge walls rose high, the space so tight their shoulders brushed the frozen rock. The snow muffled their footsteps, but also trapped the cold. The frozen lake shimmered in the fading light, a silent mirror to the gray sky above. Kayla crouched by the edge, running her fingers over the ice as if reading it. Daniel stood guard, scanning the tree line where the faint growl of engines echoed. "Again, they'll come from the gorge," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. "No room for them to spread out. That's our advantage." Kayla nodded, "And the ice is thin near the center. If they're heavy enough, it will crack." Daniel looked at her, a flicker of a grin tugging at his lips. "You thinking what?" "I'm thinking?" She met his eyes. "I'm thinking I've never liked humans much, but I like killing the ones chasing me." They moved fast. Daniel set traps with wire and grenades scavenged from his pack, burying them under snow along the narrow approach. Kayla shaped jagged ice spears from the shore, placing them under a thin layer of snow where someone might fall. Every move they made was silent, calculated. There was no more running. By the time the first snowbike appeared in the gorge, the light was almost gone. The engines growled louder, echoing against the stone walls until the sound was everywhere. Daniel ducked behind a rock, Kayla beside him. "Remember," she whispered, "wait until they're committed." The first rider entered the clearing, visor scanning. He slowed at the sight of the frozen lake, clearly suspicious, but the men behind him kept coming, forcing him forward. 3, 4, 5 riders. And behind them, 2 more on foot with rifles raised. Daniel's finger rested on the detonator. Another step. Another. Click. The explosion tore through the snow, flipping the lead snowbike into the air. The rider crashed into the ice, his machine sinking with a hiss of steam as the surface cracked. Chaos erupted. Riders swerved, shouting into comes, but the narrow gorge trapped them in the kill zone. Kayla moved like lightning. She sprinted across the ice, her boots barely touching the surface, and drove one of her spears straight through a rider's chest. Before he could fire, Daniel's shotgun boomed, dropping another in a spray of snow. The crack of ice grew louder. 2 more riders veered toward the center, and the surface gave way. Their screams were short, swallowed by the freezing black water, but not all of them fell. A tall, armored figure stepped off his bike at the edge of the clearing, moving with deliberate calm. His helmet reflected the last of the daylight, and his voice cut through the chaos. "Rook, you're making a mistake. She's not what you think." Daniel kept his weapon trained on him. "Funny, I was thinking the same about you." The man chuckled. "You have no idea what she's carrying. She's worth more than both our lives." Daniel risked a glance at Kayla. She didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. "Don't listen," she said. The commander's tone sharpened. "Ask her why the company wants her alive. Ask her what's inside her blood." Kayla's golden eyes burned. "What's inside me is mine, and I will die before I give it to you." Daniel's answer was a single blast from his shotgun. The commander dodged, rolling behind a rock, and opened fire with a plasma pistol. Blue streaks lit the night, hissing as they hit the ice. Kayla dove, sliding across the surface, closing the gap between them. Daniel kept the others pinned with gunfire, his ears ringing with the sharp cracks of combat. When Kayla reached the commander, there was no hesitation. She slammed him into the ice, the cracks spreading under their. The sun rose pale and weak over the snow-covered valley. Faint gold light spilled across the frozen lake where the battle had ended just hours before. The forest was quiet now, too quiet, the kind of silence that follows violence. Daniel stood at the edge of the trees, scanning the ridge. Smoke curled lazily from the ruins of the snowbikes. The bodies were already half buried in fresh powder, the storm erasing the night's bloodshed. Behind him, Kayla was building a small fire, her wet armor hanging on a branch to dry. She moved with calm focus, but Daniel could see the fatigue in her shoulders. The night had taken more out of her than she'd admit. "You should rest," he said. She shook her head. "Rest later. We have to move before they send the next wave." Daniel stepped closer. "They won't expect us to attack first. That gives us the advantage." Kayla's eyes lifted to his. "You're sure you want this fight, Rook? It won't be a clean one. They won't stop until one of us is gone." He thought about his cabin, the quiet life he had chosen, and the night she had appeared at his door, shivering, desperate, ready to trade her life for survival. Now she stood like a warrior again, but the fire in her eyes was different. It wasn't just about her anymore. "Yeah," Daniel said finally. "I'm sure." Kayla studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we fight together, and if we fall together." They left the frozen clearing, moving deeper into the mountains. Along the way, they found others. 2 alien women hiding in the hollow of a dead tree, a human miner limping from an old injury, and a frightened boy who couldn't speak. Kayla welcomed them without question, sharing what little food they had. Daniel noticed how the others looked at her, not as prey, but as a leader. Days passed. They traveled by night, using Kayla's alien sense to avoid patrols and Daniel's military skill to set ambushes when needed. The group grew slowly. Runaways, ex-prisoners, people who had been forgotten by the colonies. By the time they reached the high valley, they were more than survivors. They were an army in the making. The valley was hidden between 2 jagged peaks, with a river of clean water and plenty of cover. Daniel looked around at the rough shelters they were building and felt something he hadn't in years. Purpose. One evening, as the firelight flickered on the snow, Kayla sat beside him. Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "When I came to your door, I was ready to give myself away, because I thought I had nothing else to offer. But you saw me as more than a trade." Daniel smiled faintly. "You've got more fight in you than anyone I've ever met. That's worth more than anything else." Her golden eyes lingered on him for a moment longer before she looked back at the fire. The quiet between them wasn't awkward, it was the calm before the next storm. And the storm came sooner than expected. From the southern pass, a distant rumble echoed through the mountains. At first, it sounded like thunder. Then the ground began to tremble. Daniel climbed a ridge to see, and froze. A black column of